thanks very much for making the time today for Listen.Better, our interview series of leaders. Delighted to have you with us. What an incredible career you've had to date, working for Unilever, Fendi, Harrods, and now at Fremantle as Head of Global Internal Comms. Really excited to be talking to you. So can you let us start by understanding what led you to pursue a career in internal comms?
Hi, Annabelle. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here today. Well, so I guess I always felt that comms was going to be my future. I was 8 years old when I asked my parents for the first typewriter back then. So, I've always been, interested in comms and storytelling. But it wasn't, I guess, until my master's in marketing at comms that I started to feel like, I wanted to pursue a career in a global company and really focus on corporate comms. I was working as a journalist back then. So again, storytelling was part of what I was doing. But then I found my first internship at Unilever Italy more than 15 years ago. And that's where I've discovered my love and passion for internal comms. I joined the press office first and then moved into internal comms. And I guess it was a role that had everything I wanted, love for storytelling, creating great experiences for my colleagues and employees and make them feel engaged and connected and excited to play their part. So that's when the journey started. I spent 4 years at Unilever working on great engagement campaigns around brands and products, so working with office-based employees and factory-based employees, as well as engagement initiatives around sustainability and D&I. And after a while, I was just looking for, my next challenge and how I could keep growing. And I decided to move industry for the first time. So I moved from FMCG to luxury. And I joined Fendi, the Italian fashion house, part of LVMH, the luxury group. And that was my first global role. And again, for the first time, my role was to really build internal comms capabilities, work with different countries and understand what the value of internal comms was for this particular company and industry. And I guess, the beauty of our role is that you can really bring all your learnings with you and your skills and adapt them. So 5 years into luxury, what I focused most on during those years was to bring the stories to life. When your colleagues or your employees are working on such beautiful craftsmanship and pieces that that tells a lot about the history of the company. It was easier to go behind the scenes and share those stories internally and make them click and connect employees around that beautiful craftsmanship that Fendi was known for. And then after 5 years, again, another change, this time a plot twist, because my husband decided to move to the UK. And so we decided to move 5 years ago. And my first role was, like you said, at Harrods. So I was, really proud and honored to be leading the internal comms team of such an amazing, iconic place. And I spent just 1 year at Harrods dealing with, all things internal comms. And when I joined, they had recently launched a new values. So it was all about connecting the dots and connecting employees to the values and working really closely with the employee experience team. And during COVID, I then decided to go back to FMCG. I was looking for, again, another global role. And so I started at Kraft Heinz in the middle of the pandemic. So working on brands like Heinz ketchup, and mac and cheese and baked beans and all the great products that I'm sure many of us are familiar with. And again, this was an international role from my living room for the first year and a half, supporting 5 regions and over 16,000 employees around the world. And again, interestingly enough, we launched the values and the new purpose during my first month. So the role was all about trying to connect employees to this purpose and values while being, pretty much all stuck at home. And obviously we had our factory-based employees working hard to, to keep the development of products and keep the shelves filled and full with food and products. First year was all about connecting people and engage people around those values. And the second part of my experience at Kraft Heinz was about returning to work. So I'm sure this might sound familiar. So it was all about shaping the future of the office. And then, like you said, latest episode of my story is now at Fremantle. I joined Fremantle 6 months ago to lead the global internal comms function. And I love this industry. Again, another change, another industry focusing on media and creating amazing, credible entertainment, from drama and films to shows and docs. And it takes me back to where I started, I think, as I started as a journalist. So it kind of like, comes back to my first years where I really wanted to focus on storytelling. And that's what we do. We tell stories. Hence, I love the challenge and the opportunity to build internal comms capabilities, focusing on storytelling and connecting our employees around the world. So yeah, I'm loving it so far.
Fantastic. Gosh, so we've gone from wanting a typewriter at 8, which I completely resonate with. I think I had a little blue electronic one when I was in my teens. So from washing powder to handbags to baked beans to media and entertainment, it's quite a breadth of experience you've had. I suppose some of the themes that have come through as you're speaking were your passion for storytelling, connecting the dots, you said a few times, and also the different audiences from white collar to blue collar, factory through to head offices. So bring that all together, what do you believe are the most important qualities for a successful global head of internal comms, and how have you developed those qualities in yourself over time?
So, well, we have a very strategic role, right? And as internal comms professionals, we build and nurture this skill set that we can bring, from one industry to another. And that was really helpful when I had to move industries and change, tone of voice and understand the cultures and understand the different cultures and leadership teams are different, etc. So I guess to me, it was all about embracing the new challenges and stepping outside of the comfort zone and really keep nurturing those skills and learning from each experience. And that helps a lot, my creativity and curiosity, and that are all important skills and important qualities for any internal comms professional. But if I have to list a few, based on my experience, I would definitely say flexibility and adaptability. When you change roles and you grow as a professional, but ultimately I changed countries and I moved from local roles to global roles. And that really helped me understand how I could and needed to flex and adapt my style to, the different tone of voices and cultures. Being a good listener, that's how you connect with people, understand your audience, try to capture the different needs. And I guess having lived abroad helped me with that as well throughout the years. Being curious, which is, quite fundamental thing, but again, ask questions and try to understand what your leadership team is expecting, but also what can you do differently coming from, a different industry. Maybe there are some things that you can obviously change or develop or introduce. And then I guess the first one that I love is empathy. So, being a people person helps for sure. But I guess, I lived abroad and I changed so many different, cities and countries, and that helped me build a sense of, I think being a people person, understand what your audience wants from you and connect with people a little more deeper so that you can really understand their needs. And as a global function, it's so important that, we always understand how can we adapt whatever we do to local needs versus, what the bigger picture and what we want to achieve with a campaign or a communication.
Fantastic. So flexibility, adapting style, listening, understanding your audiences, curiosity, asking good questions, applying cross-sector experience where appropriate, developing empathy, understanding and connecting with audiences, and adapting from global needs to local needs, and understanding those cultural nuances. All of those, I would say, would fit in a great perspective for studying anthropology, which is what I did at degree level. So they all really resonate with me for sure. What about your personal philosophy on effective communication? I mean, there's a lot of research and literature out there around that, but what's your approach to driving positive employee engagement, and how do you ensure those principles are applied consistently?
Great question. So I think, again, as communicators, we really need to understand our audience and tailor the communication around specific needs. You know, it doesn't matter if I worked, you know, in global roles where I had to launch a global cross countries campaign, but still then I needed to ask myself a question. So how would my colleagues across the world understand this? You know, what can I flex and adapt so that this stick and, you know, make sense to them? And how can I make my communications more inclusive and understandable to them? It depends, you know, it's all about crafting your message in a way that it's audience focused rather than one size fits all. You know, that rarely works. To me, it was more like, let's understand what my office-based employees want and what are the channels that I should use to reach them versus my factory-based employees. Maybe there are some tricks and different tactics that I should use. How can I engage with the leadership team and the managers to help me drive that conversation or convey that specific message? And again, storytelling I think is what underpins everything. So if we are able to craft an engaging story around one specific topic, and I'm thinking about, you know, D&I initiatives or ESG initiatives as well, people will connect to them. So it's all about inclusivity and trying to put yourself in the shoes of your final audience. And there are so many different things that you can do to you know, make sure that happens.
In preparing for this interview, you introduced me to a term I wasn't familiar with, and forgive me, but a no-native, which I loved and have used ever since. But what are some of the benefits of being a no-native? And please define no-native first. But when you're working and launching a global campaign?
Well, clearly, from my accent, I'm not British, I'm Italian, although English has always been my second language, and I also speak Turkish, which makes things a little bit more complicated. But so English has always been the second language in any of the roles I had so far, and that helped even when I was based in Italy until, you know, 5 years ago. And I think when I was working as a country lead, that was obviously easier because majority of my comms were in Italian, and obviously, you know, I knew the culture really well. When I moved to my first global role, and then here to the UK, obviously English is my first language now, and that makes things sometimes more complicated for me, but also it's a challenge that I love. So I use English every day, all day, basically, and I draft everything in English first. But having, you know, this global role and being bilingual helps me understand what people that are sitting, you know, elsewhere, they might not be English speakers. What can I do for them to make sure that my message is clear? You know, keep it simple and clear, straight to the point, use terms that are, you know, easy to understand, and where possible, make a translation available to them, right? It's not always possible when we craft a global message, I understand that, but depending on the campaign or how, you know, important that message is, if I can plan ahead of time and make sure that the countries have, you know, a copy that can then translate, or once the global message is out, they can send a local notification in local language, share toolkits that are editable so that they can then adapt and tweak the wording as they prefer. And that helps me a lot because I've been on the other side, right? So I know how it feels to receive everything in a language, and we shouldn't be assuming that everybody can understand English, right? So we need to make sure that they can still understand and feel part of the company and included every single time we craft a communication. So that helped.
Excellent, very good. Measurement. How do you measure the success of your initiatives, and what metrics do you typically use to evaluate impact?
Well, I'm sure many internal comms professionals will relate to this and just, you know, feel a little bit lost at times. And how do we measure the impact? I would say, so listen. I know that, you know, sometimes we're just so busy in the day-to-day that we just forget to just stop and ask questions and get feedback as much as possible. Some of us might be obviously relying on the annual, if you have one, employee engagement survey, where we can understand if our communication is effective. But I think having a listening strategy in place that taps into everything we do, and it could be as simple as a feedback survey after each event we run, or, you know, I recently launched a global newsletter. At the bottom of it, you know, we added a feedback survey. Tell us what you think, you know, did you like this? Or what else do you want to see us featuring? Or after a town hall, obviously you have data like participants or comments, but I think there is also something deeper than that that you might want to ask your employees on a regular basis. And then if you are lucky enough to have channels that allow you to get analytics, you always need to go back to them and have a monthly at least report where you can see how many people log in, how many people read that news, instead of, you know, or rather at what time of the day you have, you know, a majority of your people looking around and reading your news. Those are all really important data that you might want to take into consideration whenever, you know, there is something you want to gauge and understand. And that helps me on a regular basis to also adapt and understand if my strategy is working or if I need to change something, right? And that really helped me over the years.
Excellent. So arriving with data clearly helps you gain respect as well amongst your peers and other stakeholders in the business. Talking about other parts of the business, how do you collaborate to make sure that your IC initiatives align with the broader business goals and objectives, so that you're not seen as a sort of nice to have, but actually you're core to the drive of the business?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think many of us want to be more involved, right, and have a seat at the table as much as possible. And often I think, how can we do that? I think becoming a true business partner, and I know we hear a lot about, you know, becoming trusted advisors or business partners. I think really connecting and, you know, collaborating with each function. And it could be, you know, you can join their Teams meeting, you can connect with the leader and have, you know, meetings with them on a regular basis and ask, well, what are your priorities? You know, what do you want to achieve this year and how can I help you with that? That's quite key. Obviously, you have a company strategy that underpins everything, and you have to have clarity on what that is and how your comm strategy can then tap into each pillars of this strategy and how you can bring them to life in any communication you do. And it's just not about, you know, words or, you know, just adding a little touch here and there. It's literally whenever you have a big announcement, how can you frame the communication and showcase that this M&A, for instance, or this particular initiatives is linked to that pillar of the strategy. And in order to do that, you need to become a business partner. You have to connect and talk to your leadership team as much as possible and ask them and what the priorities are and assess them as you go. And that helped me a lot over the years, especially in this new role. I think over the, my first 6 months, I've been, partnering and connecting a lot with the leadership team and the countries as well to understand how can I be more of a strategic partner to you rather than a nice to have, like you said. How can we all work together to craft this narrative that connects us to the purpose and the strategy as well, so that people can understand on a regular basis if they have that clear whenever you then send out a message or you announce a new show or you announce a new initiative, they would connect the dots. And I think we are there behind the scenes to make this happen.
Do you think there's a lag between internal comms getting and understanding that, and leadership teams and the C-suite really seeing the link between, if you're not getting the message right internally, it's going to leak in the wrong direction externally, that blurring of internal comms and external comms? Do you think there's a slight time lag in that, or has catch up taken place since COVID, do you think?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think the line between internal and external, it's almost invisible right now. Everything external is internal and everything internal is external, which sometimes we forget about, right? But I'm sure we have many recent examples that can, that really prove and show us that actually whatever happens internally is external facing as well. And therefore, it's really important that you involve and engage employees first whenever you have a big announcement, or at least at the same time, especially when something tricky or like recent reorgs that we read about every day. Unfortunately, I think it's really important that you engage your employees and you make them feel part of the change, whatever change that is. But most importantly, when you have good news and positive news, it's really important that you convey the message and you share with pride, really, whatever is happening across the business, so that your employees can become ambassadors, and they will be then helping you with your external narrative as well, and your positioning. That's really important. Yes.
Yeah, I think helping employees to feel front-footed when all about them, the proverbial's hitting the fan, but for them to have the right messaging and to feel included in the company approach to what's happening externally makes absolute sense. Laura, I haven't touched on the fact that you're a director for the Institute of Internal Comms, so just wanted to know what that means to you and what you're proud of and what's coming up in the rest of 2023.
So yeah, I decided to become a member of the IOC the first week I moved to the UK, and I couldn't wait. And almost five years now, and I'm also now on the board. And I'm really proud of what we do to connect people and professionals, to showcase the value that we bring, to promote internal comms as a career of choice. And there are lots of amazing projects happening this year, and we have a festival happening in a couple of weeks as well, and I can't wait for that. So I'm really proud of what we're doing, but most importantly, I'm proud of our community. And coming from Italy, this was quite new to me. Here in the UK, the internal comms professional community is just amazing. We're always happy to help each other, share best practices, learn from one another. And I'm really, really proud of being part of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. Yes, the idea of sharing and supporting and learning does seem to be a thread that runs through all the interactions I've had with the IOIC. So thank you for the work that you do on their behalf. I've already taken lots of your time, but one more question for you, Laura. And this is slightly left field, but what advice would have given your younger self? What would you have said to do, or perhaps nothing differently?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. I would say just go for it. Don't be afraid. You'll find your way, and don't, just trust in yourself, and don't be afraid of people's thoughts or judgment. We sometimes feel like, oh, I'm not ready for this move, or maybe I'm not enough, or maybe this is too much for me. And I'm more thinking about changing industry, moving countries. Those are challenging and difficult decisions to make. So I would just say, just go for it. Even if you feel you're not ready, you are actually. Just be brave.
Lovely. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Laura. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to meeting you in real life at some point down the line. And meanwhile, wishing you a very good summer ahead.
Thank you so much, Annabelle, and see you soon.